I want us to go to 1 Kings chapter 22. And I'm going to start reading verse 37. It says this, so the king died. It's talking about Ahab. And what was Ahab's wife's name? Jezebel. So this is where they reigned from. So the king died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried him there. By the way, he was mortally wounded at a site I take people to in Jordan, which is called Ramoth Gilead. They washed the chariot at a pool in Samaria where the prostitutes bathed, and the dogs licked up his blood, as the word of Yahweh had declared. As for the other events of Ahab's reign, including all he did, the palace he built, now listen to this, the palace he built and inlaid with ivory. Okay, now remember, and I brought some of the pictures just to remind us, we were looking at the ivory from Samaria. You can pass these around. The ivories from Samaria in the Israel Museum. They've got them in museums all over the world. Jill, do they have them in the British Museum?
Yes, I've got quite
yeah, so they got them in the British Museum and museums all over the world. Here's the thing. The most ivory that has come out of an archaeological dig in this land is Samaria, which we should expect because before archaeologists ever dug here, the Bible tells us that Ahab built a palace inlaid with ivory. Okay, if you just take one thing, if we just take one thing for each site, one main thing that the Bible says about that site and one main thing found in archaeology, I mean, it's an amazing match. For Shechem, it's a fortress temple. Talks about a fortress temple. Maybe gather them together and I don't know if Rachel is here. Just hold on to him for a second for me. For Shechem, it's a fortress temple. For Samaria, it's a palace inlaid with ivory. For Jericho, it's a fallen wall. You see what I mean? It's a match. Okay. Now I'm going to go to 2 Kings 18. Well, actually, before I do that, let's go to Micah. Now you see in Micah chapter 1, it talks about the judgment against Samaria and Jerusalem. Okay, and so Micah prophesies this. Therefore I will make Samaria a heap of rubble. Okay, now when he says that, then you got to envision this place as what it was, the glorious capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. So he's standing in this glorious capital that is so well protected. It's kind of like, you know, when they got on the Titanic, they thought it was unsinkable. They really felt about this city that it was uncapturable because it's up on this hill, which purposely Omri, Ahab's father, bought this hill for the purpose of building a city up here because it's so well protected. So this glorious, well-protected capital city, Micah says, this is going to be turned into rubble, a place for planting vineyards. Okay, so do we see the fulfillment of that historically? If you look around, you see vineyards? No, you see agriculture, but it's because Palestinians, most of them are Muslim and they don't drink wine, so they don't have vineyards, they have olive groves. So where is that fulfilled? Well, look at this. You all stay here. And let me just go over here. Okay, so everywhere where you dig down and you hit bedrock in this place, you come across these. This is a wine press. See that?
Yeah.
This is a wine press. There's a corner of a wine press here. And so even though it's used for agriculture and growing olives today, in ancient times, after its destruction by the Assyrians, it was used as a wine press. Another famous thing that comes from here are these wine jars and their handles that are stamped. Okay, so we know that wine was manufactured here. So the historical fulfillment of Micah's prophecy is seen in the layers. And if I go on reading further, it says, I will pour her stones into the valley and lay bare her foundations. Where do you think the stones from this destruction are going to go on a hilltop city like this? They're going to go down into the valleys. And in fact, one awesome place over on this side, there's no olive groves in this one place over here. And when you walk along this slope, there's the rubble from the destruction by the Assyrians all down the side of the slope. Okay. Now, let's go to 2 Kings 18. Second Kings 18 says, in King Hezekiah's 4th year, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmanezer, king of Assyria, marched against Samaria and laid siege to it. At the end of 3 years, the Assyrians took it. So Samaria was captured in Hezekiah's 6th year, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel. The king of Assyria deported Israel to Assyria. Okay, so there's the destruction of Assyria by the Assyrians. Remember, we were up in the north and we were looking up into ancient Aram. By the way, one of the stories in the Bible is when Aram puts Samaria under siege. And remember the story of the 5 lepers who go out and they're like, we're dead anyways. We have, we might as well go into the camp and see if they'll give us some food. And then all the Arameans ran out of the camp, and then that fulfilled a prophecy that was earlier given. Okay. Anyways, we looked up into the north, into Aram, and that was the buffer zone for the northern kingdom. They destroyed every single city in Aram down to Damascus. When they breached the walls of Damascus, they took Rezin and his sons, they flayed him, and then the northern kingdom of Israel was vulnerable. They came down, Shalmanezer, they put the northern kingdom under, attacked it. Every single city, fortified city, they destroyed down to its head, its capital city, Samaria. And then for 3 years, they were that persistent. They have to keep a perfect record. You don't want word getting out that they're not going to capture a city, right? That's going to encourage people to rebel and not pay their taxes. So they were so persistent that they stayed here for 3 years until the job was done. Now, the remnant that comes out of the city of Samaria are called Samaritans. They still live on top of Mount Gerizim. The remnant that comes out of Jerusalem are called Jews. The first time we have that term used, Jew, is by Sennacherib, referring to Hezekiah the Jew. Okay, so the remnant that comes out of Jerusalem, the Jews, and out of here, the Samaritans. What's the difference? What's the difference between Samaritans and Jews?
Samaritans were like a half-breed, half-caste,
okay,
half-Jewish or
where they
something.
worship.
So here's the difference. The wall of Samaria was breached by the Assyrians. The wall of Jerusalem never was. That's why then when we forward to the Persian period and the Jews come back to rebuild their temple, that's why the Samaritans are not allowed to join with them in that work. The way that they did it, the Assyrian policy was when they took a city, they left some of the local population in the new population because they knew how to do the agriculture of the land, and they knew the land. And then they took people from other conquered cities and they brought them together and they melting potted their religious beliefs and their cultures and everything together in order to try to make Assyrian citizens out of them. Okay, so Just as you said, they were a mixture. Now, if we go back to, we looked at this from the Jerusalem side. Now we're looking at it from the northern kingdom side. What do you think Hezekiah is doing down there in Jerusalem while this is under siege for 3 years? You think he's down there? Yeah, he's making his wall around the refugees. Not everybody stays to get destroyed. I know there's cities or towns when I was a kid up in northern Jordan that were tiny. Mafraq is one that comes to mind. And then when the Syrian crisis happened, now it's huge. How did it get huge all of a sudden? The Syrians were running to the south away from the conflict of ISIS, and all these towns are exploding. That's what happens to Jerusalem at this time. The remnant from the 10 tribes is running down there and living on that western hill for the first time. When you dig down to that level on the western hill, you find a refugee camp. The remains of all these makeshift houses all jammed together. And then Hezekiah is building the wall around that, and then he's building the tunnel that you walk through, Hezekiah's tunnel. Micah chapter 2, verse 12 says, here's the promise, I will surely gather all of you, O Jacob. How many tribes is that? 12. I will surely bring together the remnant of Israel. I will bring them together like sheep in a pen. So here they are again. That's the picture, the prophetic picture of Samaria. Of Jerusalem. Made up of the sheep of Israel from all 12 tribes. Okay? Thank you. Now, I want to just emphasize it one more time. Every city that rebelled against Assyria, from beyond the Euphrates and Tigris River, and everywhere in between, all the way to beyond the Nile River, every single city that the Assyrians attacked, they took, except for one. To me, the greatest attested to miracle of the Old Testament by archaeology is the deliverance of Jerusalem from the Assyrians. Because when you dig there, one of the miraculous things that you find in archaeology is what you don't find, and that is that Assyrian destruction that's everywhere else, including here, but not there. Because God keeps his promises, and he preserved his people that he promised he himself would come from in the incarnation. Okay, now you're looking at a big wall over here. Now, this is not the city wall. The city wall is down much further. This is the wall that goes around the palace complex, the Israelite palace complex. So remember, we were looking at the model at Herod the Great's palace complex, and it was walled off from the rest of the city. So was Omri and Ahab's palace, also walled off from the rest of the city. So if you think about this whole site, this is all that's been dug down to that Israelite level. Maybe 1% of the whole city has been dug down to that level. Probably not even that much. So everything that we know about Samaria from the Israelite period, archaeologically, is where it's been excavated here. So you're looking at the palace, inside the palace walls of, thank you very much, of the Israelite city.